So I'm sure this may come as a shock to some of you. I'm pretty sure I posted a video back in April saying I had no plans on selling my Eco, a little bigger there, selling my Eco anytime soon. But as I'm sure plenty of you are aware, the car market is insane for used cars right now, and Carvana offered me, or made me an offer that I just could not refuse. You know, I ended up, they offered me $6,000 less than I paid for this car back in 2018. So I just couldn't say no, and I also had the opportunity to purchase a car that I've really wanted for a while. And I'm not going to spoil it, but you'll see it in future videos because I will be taking delivery of it in exactly 6 days from now. But it's bittersweet, you know, and I'll get into more of this. I'm actually going up to my mom's house up in North Jersey, and the heater core is all repaired in the Mustang, so we do have heat, and we're going to take a spirited final long drive in my 2015 Mustang Ecoboost. And I'm actually gonna get her a little warmed up because I do want to check the oil before I leave, because we are at that point where I need to check it. This may be the last cold start you guys will hear with my Borla Attack axle backs. But alright guys, well, let's get to it. So finally selling the Ecoboost. Well, there's a flood of feelings I definitely feel by doing this. You know, I without getting too melodramatic, I had it for 3 years, and it was a point in my life where everything was kind of like went from being bad to getting better, and it's kind of like I associate this car with that. So it's a bittersweet feeling. As I mentioned, Carvana offered me an offer that I could not refuse based on the current market with automobiles. So I guess we're just going to talk about my key takeaways as far as owning this car. So first off, I want to say it's been a blast. At no point in this, I'm going to merge a little bit. At no point during my ownership did I ever regret owning the car. It's been super reliable. It's been a blast to drive. I learned a lot about how cars work and how tuning works to a very basic level, but enough that I could like diagnose whether or not the car was responding well to the modifications that I did. So it's been really, really great. But it's time to move on. And that's kind of where I'm at. So I guess first I'll just talk about what my overall impressions. Now, when I first purchased the car back in 2018, I believe in one of my videos I mentioned that this was basically Ford gave us America's answer to the Audi A5 or even maybe the S5. You know, I know the A5 isn't a rear-wheel drive car, or maybe it is. I actually don't know, but in any case, it's the answer to the Audi A5, and I still stand behind that, but I just don't necessarily think they did a good job. I think it was their answer to the Audi A5, but they could have done better. They made a fun, turbocharged, rear-wheel drive coupe, which, you know, wasn't, at the time there weren't many even that had been created, or at least that had made it over to the States. So in that note, they had a great idea, but I think they could have done better. Did they make an awesome car? Yes. Did they make a fun car? Yes. But I think that there were some points where they could have improved. So I'll just give them credit where credit's due. They made a very refined car. A very refined car for a very affordable price. And as someone who was I'll just say it was a GTI fanboy, that was very high on my priority list when I was looking at new cars. And, you know, Ford delivered on the S550. I can't do an overview because I'm driving, but if you look at the interior, they did a bang-up job on it. It feels almost European-esque as far as the refinement goes for like an entry-level European luxury model car. And they did a great job with that. And I just think that aesthetically, the S550 looks amazing. It looks very, I don't want to say foreign, but it looks unique. It looks like it's not cut from the same mold of American sports cars or muscle cars, pony cars, whatever you want to call it. And it's just really aesthetically pleasing. All the curves are in the right places, the shape, they made the car aggressive enough that it wasn't overdoing it, but it wasn't too subdued either. And I think they did a good job with that. And I think making a 4-cylinder or a boosted version of the Mustang is an awesome job. Here's the caveat. I don't think they put the right motor in here. Now, I'm going to stop you right there. I know what you're thinking. You're saying, oh, you're one of those fanboys that thinks, oh, I'm not one of those guys who's like, oh, it can only be V8s. You know, if it's not a V8, it's not a real muscle car. I'm not going to touch on that, but I'm not that person. You could have put a different 6-cylinder or 4-cylinder in this car, and if the shoe fits, wear it. I just don't think the 2.3 fits in this car for 2 reasons. One, the S550 chassis is pretty heavy, and I think that while the 2.3 has some really sweet spots in the power band that make it fun to throw into corners and make it super nimble, and the suspension is very well tuned, I think that there are some dead spots that the 2.3 is not very adequately suited for in this car. I mean, if you look at any videos on YouTube of a stock EcoBoost up against a stage 1 tuned GTI or Civic Si or WRX, they give them a run for their money. And I know it's stock versus modded, but when you factor in that they sold this car on the premise of its, the power, 310 horsepower, 330 foot-pounds of torque for the earlier models, it was a lot more than the GTI or the Civic Si or the WRX or any other car that was designed to compete within its class. And I think that it just fell short, because that's almost 100 horses more than the GTI, and a simple tune for the GTI makes it incredibly formidable against the EcoBoost. And I think that has to do with the power to weight ratio. It's not power. Obviously, the EcoBoost does have more power on paper, but I think when it comes to its execution, I think the fact that this is a turbocharged 4-cylinder with a very small turbo, and it, just like most other turbocharged 4-bangers, the minute you get into the top end, it just falls flat on its face. It has a lot, don't get me wrong, it has a crap ton of low-end torque, and it gets up and goes, and its 0 to 60 times are very impressive. For 2015, getting to 0 to 60 in 5.7 seconds with a turboed 4-cylinder was impressive, and it still is, but it's like once you get past that 60 miles an hour, out into the higher end of the power band, it just falls flat on its face. And I think Ford could have done a better job with this, and I think that there are 2 options they could have done in this regard. They could have just thrown the 3.5 liter SVO motor into the Mustang EcoBoost and use that. The twin turboed V6 would have been amazing in this car. Now you're going to say, oh well, they can't do that because then it would be too close to competition with the Ford Mustang GT. Okay, fair enough. You can tune a turboed car and see some crazy stupid numbers. You're not wrong. Maybe then here's another option. They could have kept the Cyclone motor, the 3.7 Cyclone V6, instead of axing it. They should have started with that from the get-go, and I don't know, maybe they could have made it the supercharger that they use on the Shelby GT500 on a V6, because then you have the potential for tuning with a supercharger, but there's limits to how much power you can squeeze out of a supercharger. And I think applied on a V6, it would give the V6 a ton of low-end torque, and then, in theory, based on my knowledge, the 6 cylinders would take over for the top end. So, I mean, I think my point is, maybe I'm sure you'll comment and point out some holes in my theories and ideas, and that's fine. These are just ideas I've thrown around in my head. The bottom line is, they could have used a better engine than the 2.3 liter. And so on top of that, regarding its performance, I think that as far as reliability goes, here's the other issue with the 2.3. Now, it's a very controversial topic for discussion about the EcoBoost motor not being reliable. Now, the moniker EcoBoom gets thrown around a lot, and it's difficult to really decipher whether or not it's an actual valid issue. Ford denies there's an issue, but the fact that and some people say, oh, it's tuned cars, poorly tuned cars. I have seen an abundance of off-the-shelf tuned cars, pro-tuned EcoBoosts, stock EcoBoost blow their motors. And so I don't think it's necessarily tuning. Now, case in point, I've had my EcoBoost since I purchased it, 37,000 miles, tuned it shortly after, so I was running the Cobb Stage 1 off-the-shelf tune for over 20,000 miles. I'm just over 50,000 miles now. And I think that just kind of attests to it, that there is no rhyme or reason. Now, I've taken some steps to hopefully mitigate that, such as adding one-step colder spark plugs, the Iridium NGK spark plugs, to help mitigate, any knock or timing being pulled, and just help the engine run healthier with an off-the-shelf tune that isn't necessarily customized for my specific car. The low side fuel pressure sensor. There's a theory that the original one is faulty, and even though Ford's still using the faulty ones, they do have a revised one available. And I think that is something to be investigated in. For $50 for the part, I said, what do I have to lose? So I installed that. So maybe those are also variables that I need to factor in. I'm not sure. But the point is, it's just there's no real concrete science as to whether there is or is not a flaw with the 2.3 liter. And I don't really want to wait around to find out. I've had so much luck so far with this motor, but I don't want to push that luck. So I think that based on that is my other gripe. It's just the motor. I don't think this motor is well suited for this car, and I don't think it's a really great motor in general. I'm not saying it's horrible, but I think they could have done better in that regard. And finally, just, I'm not ragging on the sound, but the sound of the 2.3 liter, it's either incredibly anemic, stock, like you can't hear anything. They actually have speakers hooked up to make exhaust noise to make it sound so you can actually hear the exhaust more in the car, which I think is a very weird thing for Ford to do, but regardless, it's so anemic that they had to hook speakers up to make the exhaust audible. And then if you go and modify the exhaust, it can get really, really bad really fast. Now, you probably followed my build on my exhaust, just making it sound better. Obviously, it's still a catback, so it's not. I wasn't really focused on performance as much as sound, and then the enjoyment of the audio of this car. So now the aftermarket companies have made great strides since then, but when I got my Borla Attack axle back and turned it into a catback eventually, there were really only 3 exhausts on the market that really sounded decent. And I'm saying sounded decent, I'm not saying sounded amazing. They sounded amazing, relatively speaking, compared to all the other exhausts, but it was a very fine line between the exhaust sounding decent and it just sounding like crap. Now, if you straight pipe your EcoBoost, that's your business. This is just my opinion, but your EcoBoost, when you straight pipe the EcoBoost Mustang, at idle, it sounds like a bloody tractor, and when you go wide open throttle, you sound like a riced out Civic. That's my opinion, and that's Don't get upset about it, but I'm just gonna say that's my perception of straight piping your EcoBoost. So really, you have to like use a legit exhaust system. So the three that were decent were the Borla Attack, or any of the Borla mufflers really, or exhaust systems I should say really, or the Circuit Concepts Garage had a really good setup for the EcoBoost, and the Tomei exhaust I thought sounded pretty awesome. Now, I mean, I'm not sure how I felt about the single exit concept, but it definitely sounded really awesome. So I'm not gonna, you know, how it looked was really irrelevant at that point. But I just don't think, I think this exhaust can sound better. I'm not one of those fanboys that if it's not a V8 it sounds like crap. Like, I'm a big fan of various V8 motors. You know, the what is it? I think it's the 3.2 liter in the Volkswagen R32. I think that sounds beautiful for a V6. The Boxer engine and the WRX and the STI, like, beautiful. They sound great. I would seriously consider getting an STI or a WRX if it was in my price range, just for the exhaust alone. But regardless, I don't think the 2.3 liter in the EcoBoost Mustang sounds good, and that's just my opinion. So those are really my only gripes. It's been a fun car. It's been a blast to drive. It is conflicting to you know, let it go, and I'm gonna miss it. But I am excited for the car that I'm going to purchase, and I'm not gonna tell you guys. You will see it in the next video. So if I'm still waiting for it to be delivered to me, but if everything works out, you'll see this video. If something tripped it up, then you wouldn't be watching this. So anyway, you know, I've got the car, my EcoBoost basically set back to stock. I pulled the cold air intake out, reinstalled the stock airbox. I took the Cobb tuner off the car. You know, I uninstalled the software and it put the stock tune, the OEM tune, back on. And now I'm actually driving up to my mom's, which is perfect because she lives about 125 miles away, and I need to drive at least normally you have to drive at least 100 miles for your car's ECU to reset the O2 sensors and the CATs and run and show the emission system is ready, which I'm guessing Carvana's probably going to check out, because they're going to, you know, they want to make sure the car is all up to snuff. And I technically told them that the car was stock. I'm hoping that they won't notice the blow-off valve adapter or figure out what it is, or really care about the Borla Attack I have on the back. I have the vibrant muffler on there still, so I'm hoping that that toned it down enough that they may not realize that it's not stock. Hopefully it won't affect the, you know, the monthly payments I agreed to, but we'll see. I did the best I could. You know, I got the ECU back to where it should be, and I got rid of the cold air intake and put the factory airbox back in. So fingers crossed. But anyway, it's we're probably coming on like almost 20 minutes or 15, so I'm gonna get out of here. Happy it is New Year, or not New Year's, Christmas Eve. So if you're celebrating Christmas, hope you have a great Christmas Eve. Hope you guys have a great holiday weekend in general, and I'll see you in the next video, which will probably be in 2022. All right, guys, take care.